Welcome to Processing Purpose, a business and lifestyle podcast committed to having honest conversations about the stuff in our lives that is often suppressed, ignored, or overlooked. We are two brothers from very different backgrounds, but with one common goal. From entrepreneurship to relationships, from hobbies to house projects, nothing is off limits as we process becoming the best version of ourselves in business and life.
We're back.
We're back.
Today, all sorts of feelings. Man, we talked through some good stuff this morning, actually,
Yeah.
to kick it off. And I think we're going to bring some pretty valuable content today.
I hope so.
What do you want to kind of kick it off with topical stuff or just check in or where you're at?
Yeah, so we were talking this morning and going, all right, what should we talk about? And as we do most podcast recording mornings.
And I still love that.
Yeah. The challenge is that things don't always change quickly, right? And when you're thinking about topical stuff,
Man.
it can feel like, gosh, we just talked about this and we just talked about that, and we're kind of in the same headspace, and we don't want this week to week. I guess it's bi-weekly, but you know, the consistency of our conversation to feel the same, like overcoming and like,
Right.
you know, how to do it better and,
Right.
you know, how to deal with challenges. And it feels like it's been kind of that. And so as we were talking about, it's like, where are you at? And it's like kind of in the same spot.
But we talked about the importance of being authentic through that, because we also don't want to like polish this up in a way that makes you feel like it's all roses in sunshine. It is like, there is obviously rewards. There's things we're working toward. Otherwise, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
But like, this is real. We're being real.
And sometimes it's just a grind.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is what it is. So today, though, instead of staying in that vein, although we're going to continue to talk about the reality of this moment for both of us, because otherwise it would be inauthentic. Is that a word?
Disingenuous.
That's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you're on par.
Yeah. Inauthentic. I just made that up.
I think it's real, actually.
Is it real? All right. Well, maybe I didn't make it up. Emotional stability. I think that's the thread that I want to draw, that we've talked about drawing today, is like when it's going bad, when it's going great, you gotta keep the oscillation under control.
Right. And staying neutrality. We talked about stoicism, obviously, in past conversations. And I really am aiming for that. I want not, and it's weird. I feel like stoicism has a stigma of emotionless behavior.
Yeah.
That's actually not what it is. If you learn about it a little bit more, you learn that it's actually some of the most thoughtful and careful ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
But it really, I would say, efforts to be neutral as best you can, and not just emotionally, but even mentally. Right? Just seeing things through a lens of things could go either way here, and I just got to keep myself in this lane. Otherwise, my emotions, for sure, you know this, we've talked about it a lot, you guys know, can really sway you in ways that are unhealthy. Sometimes they can help, you know, sometimes they can help you respond in a way that creates enthusiasm or excitement, and who doesn't want more of that, right? So you have to have both in order to have that, right? You have to have both sides, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, my first question for you, and maybe you just kind of answered it, but how do you define emotional stability? Emotional, like, neutrality?
You know, this might be too simple, but it's kind of what I tell my kids. It's, you know, just because you're not feeling well inside doesn't mean it should change the way you behave and treat others. Right? Like that, I feel like that is the definition of emotional stability. Oftentimes we're not feeling great, whether it be physically or emotionally or maybe even mentally. Maybe you're going through something at work and, you know, you're getting beat up by your boss a lot, and it's just beating you down to a bloody pulp. Like, I think emotional stability is keeping yourself in a place where all of those things might be happening to you. I'm not saying you're a victim, but you're able to still project out to the world goodness, and joy and grace, you know?
Well, and probably the other side of that, of stability, is when things are going really good. Like, if you don't temper that as well,
Sure.
you come off as like a little much,
Right.
a little extra,
Right.
right? You know, people are only as happy for you as they can be for themselves,
Sure.
right?
Yeah,
and
that's true.
if you're crushing life and the people around you are struggling, like, it's it's not fun. It's not fun. And so to be empathetic in those moments, even when you're killing it, and not to be over the top with how good things are, but just be like interested in them and where their life's at. Like, you have to be able to temper the other side of that too.
Right.
And it does come back to, don't let your emotions dictate necessarily the way you treat others. But we don't always see it in that lens. When the juices are feeling good, that kind of comes out a little easier, and negativity comes out also, but it can be a little much for people.
Yeah, so you have to have some self-awareness around that, right? You have to, in fact, I think I shared with you, maybe it was on the last podcast, hopefully I'm not repeating myself, but the best way to measure a man's character is how he treats others that cannot benefit him. Man, that's kind of what we're talking about here, right? Like you're in a place of growth and excitement and all that kind of stuff. And I think too, if you've been through these cycles enough, you know that pendulum can swing. And so, check in there too.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah, in a heartbeat. We've been through it. Some of us have for sure been through it. But do stay on the success track in terms of plan for success. You know what I mean? Don't always wait for those pendulums. You don't want to be the guy that always waits for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be at least aware enough to know that, you may be in this lane for today, but 10 years from now, that those roles could reverse. Yeah. And the person that might be struggling and you're helping out along the way could be in your position later on. And it's always important to be kind, because who doesn't want to be lifted up when we're down? I mean, we need that.
So, all right. So here's a big theme for my life in this emotional health space.
Okay.
Is understanding the line between emotional stability and being numb. I was brought up in an environment where emotional stability was highly valued. And while on the surface that is accurate and intelligent, the way I interpreted it as an adolescent was numb.
Sure. Stuff it.
You just don't feel it.
Sure.
Emotions don't exist. And so how do you allow yourself to feel it? Not stuff it, and not carry it into every conversation so that you're swinging high or swinging low. Like, how do you dance that dance?
Yeah. I'd say for sure as time has gone on, I've actually felt myself shift into a more emotionally, hopefully you've seen this in my life. You're like, I have not seen any of that. That's a blind spot. But I felt like I've kind of settled down a little bit. And I think part of it is, along the lines of what you asked me last time, and like, you're in, you're out, you're up, you're down. Where are you at with all this? And
yeah,
I think it's finding things that make sense.
Yeah.
Right. It's your ambitions, mine, can get in the way of my common sense sometimes. I'll admit that. I'll be vulnerable and say it does. And so I get all excited about things, so excited about things that could go right, that I sometimes forget about, all right, curb. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and taking bite-sized chunks and making sure you're making rational decisions along the way. And why I've made that shift or felt that shift could be an age thing, but I really, really want this to work. I really want it to work. And I believe it can work. And I think, once belief sets in and you're like, man, I feel like if I start to make even some of these minor changes in the industry, I can change the industry. And I have this real passion that's brewing that I can not only change the industry, not only operationally and how systems can be created around each agent, but that the quality of life for the agent can absolutely improve. This is a stressful freaking business, man. It is. It's a really stressful business. And most people get out of it pretty quickly because they realize I don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
And I don't want those people to fall off. I think they absolutely have skill sets that can stay in the game, but the emotional stability it takes to keep on keeping on, that's a whole nother conversation. Most people don't have it. So this is a very relevant conversation actually right now that we're dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, there's this odd dichotomy when you're talking about emotional stability, because it can swing in so many different directions, and it can be interpreted in so many different directions. So what I really want to drive at is like, one, what does it feel like to be emotionally stable? Two, what does it look like? Like, what is the actual tangible interaction with a person that's emotionally stable? Because it can go both directions. It can go numb, even keel. I don't get up, I don't get down. And if you, but that's not because you're in control of your emotions as much as it is you're deciding that they don't exist. Like, they're not important, I'm not feeling them, and you stuff it, right? And it just creates kind of this neutral numbness. The other side of it is almost kind of what I would call, oh, you've seen it in some circles, this kind of toxic positivity, where it's like, it lacks authenticity, right? So being emotionally neutral, emotionally stable, not numb, but authentic to the emotion of the moment without being disingenuous. Because we've been in those, we've seen those people, we've been around those people, we know those people. How are things? Fantastic, fired up, couldn't be better. And it's like, I know you and I know what's going on, and you're full of shit. Right? And so it's like, it's such an interesting soup of trying to go, what does this feel like? What does this look like? And I'm not sure I have any answers, because I've been wrestling with this for most of my adult life, is like bringing some of the emotion back in to my life, feeling it, not stuffing it. So
there's another end of that spectrum too, I think. And I'll speak to the emotional side of things. When you do, if you're an empath and you do feel the same things people are feeling, like empaths you can almost take on someone else's emotions, which I think sometimes can be damaging. You probably shouldn't be a psychologist if you are. I'm just guessing, because you don't want to take that stuff home with you. But on the other side of that spectrum is what I'll tell you is what it feels like is I feel the emotions. I feel the heightened my nervous system's kind of heightened and running and all that kind of thing. But on the flip side of that, the negative is you create this mask, right? You put on this facade. And I often say that the world's a stage and everyone's an actor. That's a William Shakespeare quote. But I feel that way because that's how I've had to respond to it, because you certainly don't want to look like an emotional weirdo, you know, freaking out and spazzing out and getting all, you know, jazzed up about things. I've been there. I've gone there. You've been there around me when that's happening. It's just not becoming. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah.
Well, it feels fake.
Yeah, it does. And it's just,
and it comes off as fake.
It's obnoxious too.
Yeah.
It just feels obnoxious. So you have to curb, you almost have to put on like a different personality almost, right? And it almost creates this passive aggressiveness. It can, right? Because you're like, I don't want to actually share how I feel right now. Right? Because it's going to come off a certain way or whatever else. And so you start to curb those emotions and hide them a little bit. So back to that numbness conversation. Yeah. So on the other side of the spectrum, the numbness is the same. It just looks a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking with a friend yesterday. I went over, they were remodeling their house, and went over and checked it out and doing a great job. It looks beautiful. But he was asking, he's like, how are things? And as I launched on responding to that question, I do my personal approach to this when someone's like, how are you? Is to not, depending on the relationship, is to try not to just go, good, man. Right. And just, like, I try and take a beat and respond genuinely. But it's an interesting dance between victim and authenticity.
You don't always be the guy that has a sob story to talk about either, yeah.
So you have to be authentic to the moment without being bound by it.
Yeah.
And that's an odd, it doesn't come natural. At least it doesn't for me. Maybe it does for some people. It doesn't come natural. And not that I default to victimness. I default to deflection. But it doesn't come natural to be authentic to the pain of the moment without wallowing in it. Like, without, like, just staying there and just being like, yeah, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then the fire and the smoke, and then this exploded, and all of that may be true. And you can speak to it without having this, like, woe is me attitude. It's just, emotional stability is an interesting and odd for me. It's kind of elusive.
But I think it makes me wonder if we should be a little bit more emotionally intelligent about the questions we ask too. We're so flippant about, we're social creatures, so of course it's always a small talk at first of, hey, let's check in. How you doing? Great. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. But let's be careful about what we ask people, and like when we're asking people how they are, and you get a genuine response, let's be open to having a conversation instead of saying I don't really, because you could tell like the moment you go into that. Some people, if it's a true friend, they'll lean in. But some people you can tell, and I'll share this, not necessarily I was sharing my heart or anything like that, but I ran into a pastor, and I was like, hey, just kind of introducing myself and all that kind of stuff. And I could tell he was just needing to talk to somebody else. Like, it was just like, dude, you just got to go somewhere else. And so I was feeling that, and I think, anyway, you keep going.
Yeah. So for me, when those situations happen and you're trying to be authentic to the moment, you speak to it, but you do it with a different energy. I think that's the way I try and do it. Like, and the energy that you can bring forward can be, you can manifest that. Like, you can bring energy,
sure,
even if you're not feeling energy, right? And when you're feeling energy, you can temper that energy so that you come across a little even. So, yesterday when, to make this real to this moment for both of us, the world kind of exploded in the Cascade conversion world this week. For those of you that are up on social media and things, Meta had a worldwide outage on Tuesday. Everything crashed for not a long time, but it was out across the board. Facebook and Instagram were offline. Everything came back online shortly thereafter. But their back-end systems, all their APIs, all their integrations have just been struggling. And we rely heavily on Meta's API integration for leads. And it has absolutely disrupted our entire tech stack and workflow this week. So I spent all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday trying to troubleshoot, like, is it me? Did we do, did something shift on the Meta end and I need to update settings or permissions on my end to make it happen? Like, going back and forth with we have a third-party integrator that kind of manages it, and, what are they seeing? Is this widespread? Just trying to wade through, it's not working. Why is it not working? And where's the breakage at? And so here we are Friday morning. It's still not fixed. Here we are Friday. This happened Tuesday morning. Friday morning, it's still not fixed. And so it's been a bit of a it's been a cluster, to be honest.
I'm excited to see what word you come up with here.
It's been a mess. And so when my buddy asked me yesterday, how are you doing? Like, I wanted to be authentic to, like, well, the house is burning down at the moment.
Right.
But good news, fire department's on the way, and so you kind of have to be. Well, it's been a tough week. The Meta outage has really, disrupted our systems, and we're doing our best. So you speak to it without allowing the emotion to stay there.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're not feeling it, and this week was incredibly frustrating, discouraging, like lots of bundled negative emotion.
Sure.
Including fury. I was downright angry at points as people were pointing fingers at other people, and this isn't us. They were blaming it on us. Like, it was a mess. And so a whole range of emotions. But if you stay there, you can't create good resolution. It's tough to be creative. It's tough to problem solve when you stay in a space of, like, this is happening to me.
Stress.
And it was happening to me. It was happening to us. It has affected us dramatically. My staff has been grinding, trying to figure out what's going on and manually updating systems because none of the integrations are working. And it's been an absolute disaster. But that's not, you can't stay there. Otherwise, you can't problem solve. And so being authentic to that conversation with Brian, and at the same time bringing into it, like, the levity of, like, solutions and here's where we're headed. And I don't know. I don't know if that it felt right in that moment to be authentic with what was going on without being like, double middle fingers to Meta and let's burn everything down. And
Right.
I may or may not have said that anyways, but I try not to.
Sure.
I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I mentioned it before, but you have juice from this. I can tell that your lane is problem solving. You can tell that you're like, this is where I shine. But what happens, like, you spoke to it a little bit, but what does emotional instability look like? What happens when your back's against the wall and you don't have an out and you don't have a solution? What does that feel like for you, in contrast to what emotional stability looks like or feels like? What does it feel like to be unstable and not have a solution quite yet?
For me,
yeah. Or do you feel like you're actually pretty steady Eddie through that too?
No, I was pretty down Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
And even a good portion of yesterday. I was angry. I think that was probably the predominant emotion was anger.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't get anybody to actually help me. They kept giving me generic troubleshooting help and like, well, it's probably a permissions issue. And I'm like, no, you don't understand the entire system's broken. It's not like I have an account that's offline. Like all of them are down. And so getting somebody to actually listen to me, getting them to the point where they're like, oh, I see what's actually going on.
Were they contentious?
No, they weren't. They were just dismissive.
Oh, which actually is even worse.
It's
like no energy, just sloggy. Ugh.
That's like usually when we have these problems, it's a permissions issue. Go to this page and make sure that read the troubleshooting guide on getting your permissions all lined out to make sure that they're all in alignment. I'm like, you ding dong, it was working on Monday. It's not a permissions issue.
Wow.
And so, but when that happens for me, I start fighting.
Right.
So when I'm in a negative bind, like I hunker down and fight.
Do you feel energy from that, or do you feel like just anger?
No, it's not positive energy. It might be negative energy, but it's just like no, I'm going to solve this. Like lock me in my office and this is not how we go out.
Right.
And I just grind until I figure something out. And that's not comfortable necessarily.
It's stressful.
It is. It's stressful. And unfortunately, the family pays a price with that. But the alternative is the stress of I don't know what to do.
Right.
And if I'm taking action, at least I'm trying to affect the change.
Right.
Versus victims say that this is happening to me and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And so I get to work, which unfortunately means long. I mean, I worked till 9 p.m. last night, after starting at 8 a.m., 8:30. And so I just grind it out.
So you're getting punched in the you're getting punched in the nuts for a while here.
Yeah.
Over and over, a couple days of like, where is this going? Walk us through that. Walk us through like how did you pull yourself through anger and frustration and all that to a point of like, okay, I'm seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. There's some resolve here because you came in today saying like I have an out. There's a solution here. Maybe you don't have to speak specifically to what that is, but how did you arrive there just in generalities?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I did to weather this storm, if you will, and that is I tried to stay in tune with what the moment required of me. So what I mean by that is even on Wednesday, okay, when things were probably at its height of just like discomfort. My daughter came up to me after coming home from school. I went down, I had to refill my water glass, and she came up to me and said, "You want to go throw the Frisbee with me?" And the world is burning down around me relatively, right? And I was like, "Yes, I do."
Good for you.
Yes, I do. That is, yep. We're going to go throw the Frisbee. I'm going to go kick the soccer ball. All I did is take 15 minutes. But it meant a gob to them.
Yeah.
To go out, throw the Frisbee. And I set the expectation. I was like, look, this is going to be quick. I got a lot of work to do, but yes, let's go out and throw the Frisbee. And then Koa came out, my youngest. Dad, will you kick the soccer ball with me? I was on my way in, and I'm like, yes, I will. So I took 5 more minutes, kicked the soccer ball around with him. And then I was like, I love you guys. I got to get back to work. I gave them their due, their time, even though that wasn't all I would have liked to have given them. I gave them what I felt like I could, made them important, created a diversion for myself to just be outside, get sun in my eyes. It was a beautiful day. Just change the rhythm a little bit, change your own personal state and energy, and then get back to work.
I feel a sense of guilt too sometimes when my kids, and I'm busy, sometimes I can't. Sometimes I have to say no, and I'm like, man, it just weighs me down feeling that sense of guilt that I didn't spend that time with them. So I guess the value there too is not only for them, but man, for you to not have to feel that sense of like, you know what, I stepped up for a short time as a dad, definitely did what I could. And that actually is a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. If you're a parent, you understand.
Yeah. Well, and yes, there's the fulfillment, the satisfaction of making sure that you do what is the bigger priority, right? Businesses will come and go. Challenges and problems will come and go. Your family's going to be there.
Right.
And so giving them the best version of yourself, even though it might not be the best version that you'd like to give them, is important. But creating diversions is important. Like, so for some, if you don't have kids, that just might mean closing the laptop and going for a 5-minute walk.
Right.
Just go walk around the block. Change your environment to change the way you're looking at a problem. And so what ended up happening is I was feeling all of this just negative, kind of a red vortex. And negative emotion has gravity. You get pulled to it, and then other things that weren't that big of a deal get pulled to it, and they're big and blown out of proportion. And it just creates kind of this vortex of just destruction. And so you have to change your state, and that will allow you to create new thinking patterns, new ways of looking at the problem. And so we went from trying to solve how do we get this back online to, okay, I know this is going to get fixed. It's going to come back online. I don't know when it's going to come back online. I mean, we're still 3 days later, and it's not back online yet. I need a total alternative solution.
So your emotional state directly impacts your intelligence.
I think it does. I have no statistics on that, but I think it does.
I mean, in a way, you proved it just by your exercise of changing your environment and seeing things in a different light. You created new thinking patterns by changing your emotional state.
And it didn't dawn on me then, but when I was going to bed that night, as I was starting to lay down, I went, I know what I need to do. And it struck me. And we had been...
Where does that stuff come from?
Yeah,
I just love that stuff.
Yeah, and we had been working on another solution of possibly moving clients over to a different software platform. And I was like, I need to find out if that one's been interrupted. Because we've been doing some testing. I have a few clients on it to do some testing. And that one wasn't affected by Meta's API integration. It was still online. And I was like, okay, worst case scenario is that we move everybody over to this new platform sooner than we thought. And I was like, if they want to continue to screw around and point fingers at somebody else, that it's not their problem, then I'm just going to peace out. And so I started getting on a path yesterday, midday, of like, all right, we got to grind through the learning curve. We have to accelerate the learning curve of this new platform.
Sure.
And start creating the system to bring everybody over onto it. So for me, I mean, you mentioned it this morning. You're like, you have a different energy. Like, you have energy even though everything's messy right now. And I think I figure things out. When I was talking to my mastermind, I don't know, 2 or 3 repetitions ago, and I was like, what do I do well? Like, what is my superpower? Because everybody has a bit of like,
I think I know it.
And they go, you figure things out. That was their words, not mine. But solving the problem, figuring out how the pieces need to come together, seeing the big picture, the strategy, what gaps need to be filled. That's I think where I'm learning, where I think I excel. And so coming up with that solution gave me energy. It's like, okay, I have an out. I know how to make it might be painful for the next week and a half as we make the transition, but I know what we need to do.
Are you finding some value? You've been coaching clients. Are you finding some value helping them problem solve as well? Because and here's why. I watched, some of you probably have as well, the show The Prophet with Marcus Lemonis, and I've watched him over and over and over, and I've had the thought. I'm not kidding. I've never said it to you, but I've had the thought of, I could totally see Luke doing this. This makes sense to me for him, that you could go invest in broken businesses, and take a look at probably some pretty simple things that are overlooked or blind spots of the owner. The owner typically is the problem. Spoiler alert. But being an emotionally stable individual, dealing with maybe emotionally artist type owners in a business, I don't want to project that on you, but man, it's clicked with me. Like, yeah, this is like watching Luke up here.
Yeah. I think I could totally do it. I don't know what that would look like. The coaching that I've done has all been in the same vertical that I'm in.
Okay.
So the problems, the challenges, it feels a little rinse and repeat.
Sure.
And so it can kind of gets boring.
Right.
Because it's the same. Everybody's dealing. It's maybe a variation or a nuance, but for the most part, they're dealing with the same issues. And so it doesn't have a lot of juice. So, we had talked about, you just started coaching, and about 6 months ago or so, I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to open up and do some coaching. And I opened that up to my current audience and had some takers and started doing some of that. And I think even like within the last few months, you're like, how's that going? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's for me. And I think even now as we talk about it, like, I'm not sure it's necessarily coaching that I'm uncertain about as much as it's like coaching within only the same lane, I think, doesn't have enough variety for me. I think maybe is more of the answer.
Right. And I would say paired with analysis, you're an analytics guy, maybe taking the full scope, full approach of, hey, I'm going to look at your whole business as a whole. I'm going to help you approach things in different ways, in different businesses, right? You're in the same lane categorically in terms of, types of businesses, but no, taking on the challenge of new businesses, new industries. How does this work in this industry, and solving those problems, I think could be, I don't know, I think it'd be really fruitful.
Yeah. It'll be fun to see, whether it's through this podcast or through, piggybacking on your coaching as you come across, businesses that need help. I don't know where it'll go. I'm totally open to it. Yeah. I think I do have a lot of experience and value to provide in certainly a certain range. Like, I'm not going to be able to sit down with, a company that's doing $100 million a year and provide the same level of value that I could with someone that's getting off the ground and is in the early seven figures, right? I think it's entirely different market and different business. But for the right people, I think I could definitely provide some good solutions and move things forward. We'll see what happens. Happens.
I think year 2 or 3, I don't know the timeline for most businesses, but I'm guessing the average of business dropout is within the first 2 years for most, right? And so if you can catch people before they give up, right? I talked about it with you guys, the brother-in-laws, right? Like, how often do we give up right before the reward?
Right.
Right. And if we can catch those people right before they give up and go, man, that hockey stick, man, that's about to take off. And if you can get them and go, this can work, and you have that informed optimism, man, that could be a really valuable, not only for you financially, but you intrinsically too. Like, whoa, dude, I'm saving entrepreneurs from bowing out.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people give up before they should.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways.
Sure.
And I think some people get romantic, especially with business owners, about their
cling
idea.
on.
And they, this is my baby.
Sure.
And they hold on too tight.
Right.
Versus just being like, all right, this ran its course, next.
They need honesty. They need truth.
So just being able to be that outside, like, feedback of, like, what's real here, what's pretend, what are you too close to?
Yep.
So anyways, but let's come back to the topic here. How does emotional stability show up with what's going on in your world right now?
Yeah, so I spoke to it a little bit, but my pendulum swings kind of the other way in that, I wouldn't say the other way, but for me, it's very much like too optimistic, a little bit like you had mentioned, too positive, Peter. I'd say that's a little bit curbed getting older, just kind of going through cycles of things. But I tend to see things so optimistically that I do need, and I have them, thank God. I have anchors in my life around me that can hold my feet to the ground and say, okay, yeah, but let's think through some of these things a little bit more, rigorously. And so I am. I feel like there's a shift in me where I'm taking a more bite-sized approach to making next moves and trying to really pay attention to things that are really important. In business, especially when you get started, you can get caught up in the mirage of things that don't matter.
Yeah.
Right? It's really easy to get pulled down that lane, and that in and of itself can create some emotional instability because you're just lost and you're confused going, I'll give you an example. When I first started in real estate, this is a small thing, but I just had it in my mind. I had it locked that, man, if I just had 100 pens with my name and phone number on it, and I handed that out to all the restaurant, servers and all that, blow up. Huge. Nope. Terrible idea. Doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Those sorts of things. And you have kind of these ups and downs, but it's trial and error, and you kind of learn over time what matters and doesn't matter, and more importantly, what matters to you and doesn't matter to you and what you want to spend your time on.
Is that a real example, by the way? That's cute that you thought 100 pens was actually going to make the difference for you.
I genuinely thought that.
That's awesome. I had never heard that before.
I did hang door hangers, and that's kind of in the same vein, although a little bit more effective for sure.
A little bit, yeah.
Got my first listing that way, actually.
There you go.
The guy was a jerk, but it was my first listing nonetheless, and I'm grateful because I'm in real estate and all that. But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to knock you off track there.
No, it's all good. But for me, I just, I got to be careful not to always have rose-colored glasses on. For me, it's important to stay positive because I don't want to. I've felt funky before. I've had those dips in darkness, and I just don't like it. I try to avoid that as much as possible. I think we all do. But I just as I'm getting older and a little bit wiser, not a lot wiser, but a little bit wiser, I'm just realizing that hey, everything can shift in a moment's notice. We talked about things can change really quick. We even had a podcast where that morning you had a huge shift in excitement. Your friend invited you down to Vegas, and it was like, whoa, dude, everything feels like it's totally lining up now. And so anyway, there's a lot of positive motion. I don't want it lost on you or me that I shouldn't stay enthusiastic though and excited about what's going on and not stay or not be flat in front of my group when things are growing and we're having positive change. So, for me, I think what I'm, just hit me all of a sudden. Actually, I'm just being really raw and honest. My emotional instability right now is at home. I'm feeling a lot of positive motion with work, and at home we have our ups and our downs and our good days and our bad days. But I feel like I'm not saving enough for home. I feel that way, and I need to. This is a good check-in because I was like, in so many ways, because you asked me this morning, and I thought in so many ways, man, I feel really good about what's going on right now. I want to just keep these wheels in motion, but it feels like a grind at home right now. It does, if I'm being real. The family unit right now is good, but it doesn't feel prioritized.
Man, I think people can resonate with that.
And it's not even, and here's what I'm being really raw and honest about. It's not even time or lack of time. It's being present in time, being present in the moment with the kids. That's for me right now. I'm pretty checked out.
Where's your head going if you're not able to be present? For me, I find that it's harder to be present when things are going bad. It's easier to be present when things are going good. What do you feel is keeping you from being there when you're there?
Honestly, you saying that, I absolutely resonate with not being present when things are going good.
So you're the other side of it.
I'm the other side of it. When things are going good, I'm like, get out of my way, everybody. We're moving. Man, the train is moving. For me, we've talked about a lot of the grit and grind, and like, I'm like, finally the engines are burning, baby. Let's go, And so, I've also been through a lot to get to this point, and it feels like, man, I'm finally ready to sprint, And so that feels really good, but I get lost a little bit, and I forget to pay attention to what's going on in front of me. And so much so that my wheels are spinning and my creativity's flowing. I'll find myself like milling around the house doing nothing just because the juices are flowing. I'll walk down halls and like I'll end up in it sounds crazy, like I'm losing my mind a little bit, but you know what I think most people go there a little bit when you're maybe in a bad space. Maybe that's more resonates for more people when they're in a bad space and they're going down some sort of, spiral, going like, I can't get out of this. But I do that actually in a positive lane.
Interesting.
Probably more so. Yeah.
That's incredibly fascinating because we're completely opposite on that.
Like you slow down
when things are going well. I feel like the world slows a little bit. I see everything a little bit clearer. I breathe a little bit better. I'm able to be present with my family. And when things go bad for me, that's when I like buckle down and I grit, and it's like it's time to figure it out. And I push everything else to the side. But it's the opposite for you. That's really fascinating. So what I observe through that for you is two things. Kind of like what I have to do when things are going bad is make sure that I intentionally respond when the kids are like, will you go throw the Frisbee?
Yeah.
Okay? When things are going good, you need to intentionally respond when they interact with you or when you see an opportunity. But the other thing I see for you being in a positive vortex that will kind of sweep you up is making hasty decisions.
Sure.
Right? Because you want to keep that momentum going and you want to keep the juice going. And so forcing yourself to slow it down so that you can make a decision intelligently versus hastily, I think is going to be the other key component. Do you find that you make decisions too quickly when you're in a fury of progress?
I definitely because I'm a firm believer that again, it's a little too positive, Peter, but I truly believe all things will work out as long as you are kind and you work hard. I think all things, as long as you focus on things that truly matter and will last, everything else will fall away. And because of that, it's kind of the you only live once mentality, and that can also get you into a lot of trouble. So you got to be careful. So the answer is, yeah, of course. I mean, there are times where I feel like, sure, that's an expense, but and a lot of times I think I'm laughing because I've convinced myself and I convince others, I'm pretty good at that some of these expenses, and I need to look through a different business lens, they're investments, right? It's all going to come back to us. You got to believe it's going to come back. And so, well, maybe that's true. And right,
Yeah.
you're always looking for an ROI on everything you spend money on, but sometimes it doesn't play out that way. And I think you just have to be careful. But yeah, of course I make some interesting choices along the way, but I also know that, things that I've stewed on in the past were such nominal decisions. And I look back and I'm like, what did I freak out about?
Sure.
I mean, this is like $600. Like, it's not going to sink the ship, And so I'm trying to get to a place in my life where I'm somewhere in the middle, right? Where I'm finding that balance between it. And, I was just going to speak to this too is, I think my response in kind of losing my way when I get into a positive is just FOMO, right?
Yeah.
I think we all get there. We all have that experience where like, I just don't want to miss out on this possibility. But I think for me and you, we've learned enough along the way to know that business takes time.
Yeah.
And it takes grit, and it takes, consistent effort along the way that, expediency, sure, in some lights matter. But when it comes to building a business and playing the long game, I'm not missing out. I'm not missing out.
Yeah.
I'm in the game.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think you said it there somewhere in the middle, right? It's not that you're not feeling the things.
Right.
It's that the oscillation and the way it manifests to those around you
Perfectly said.
look different.
That was perfectly said.
Right. And so when you're down, feel down. Like, it's okay. Like, that is
Totally.
the reality of the moment. Feel it. Don't stay in it. Don't wallow in it. And when you put your foot forward with conversation and with your family, be authentic to it. But don't be negative about it.
Right.
You know, and when things are good, feel it.
Right.
Because you can't fully appreciate the good unless you've had the bad.
Right.
And so appreciate the fact that you're feeling the good.
Right.
And hold on to it.
Yeah. Keep that in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Don't lose it.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm matters.
Just bottle that stuff up and take a snort on a bad day and you know, feel good about it. And then when you're dealing with your family, let that stuff flow into your family. Like, let them feel the positive emotion of what's going on and the good things. Show them what healthy emotions look like.
Sure.
And then be empathetic when you're with your community, when you're around them.
I don't know why it hasn't dawned on me, but why wouldn't I just sit down with my kids and say, hey, I know I've been really distracted, but this is what's going on, and this is how Dad responds when I get really excited and positive, and I'm really sorry if this is coming across this way. Don't feel like it has anything to do with you. I need to have that conversation, man. Yep. Why not just communicate it? This is really good.
Yep.
I'm really grateful you said that. And then I want to jump back real quick. I know we're staying on a positive track here, but you taught me something a while ago that was really impactful to me. I use it. Not just saying I use it. And it was more in line with getting yourself out of, or at least recognizing what you're going through and putting words to it. The Sedona method.
Yeah.
Right? Can you just walk us through again? I know we talked about it before briefly, but just walk us through. What is that? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, it's really a way of getting out of kind of a negative funk.
Right. Exactly.
More so than anything. But it is, what are you feeling?
Right.
So, like, putting words to it, putting language to, like, you know, what is the reality of this moment? Okay. Are you ready to be done with it?
So it's a choice.
Yeah. Are you ready to stop feeling that way? And if so, when are you going to do that?
Man. Someone asked the question, how does your anxiety and depression serve you? And it was such an aggressive approach to the question, but going through the same exact process, but that method feels so much more enlightening.
Yeah.
Feels like I have choices through this. I don't have to stay here, right? Your own little prison almost. And
I think the rub for people is, how do I not feel it? How do I let this go? How do I move through it? It's not how do I ignore it and stuff it. Are you ready to ignore it and stuff it and move on?
Right.
It's how do you process it and move through it? And for me, that's changing state, changing environment.
Sure.
Going on a hike, going on a bike ride, going sweating at the gym, going for a run, go playing with the kids, cooking a meal, like something that changes the input that I'm receiving, changes the data, changes the energy, right? If you're a person that sits behind the computer and your challenges are all at work, like, sitting behind the computer isn't going to help you feel better.
Right.
So you have to find ways to jumpstart that system of moving through it.
Isn't it interesting too, when we're going through our stuff? It's interesting that we feel like the world's feeling what we're feeling. I feel like the world is focused in on and it is our world, but it's focused in on this problem that we're going through. But like you said, when you step out into a different environment, walk into nature, whatever else you do, you realize that actually your problem is so small.
Yeah.
It's so finite compared to what's going on in the rest of the world and what truly does matter and what fills you up and brings you joy. And so, man, I don't think I can express enough how important what Luke just said is. It's just
changing your environment.
Change your environment. If you want to be emotionally stable, learn when to be or be self-aware of knowing when to change your environment. Is probably number one.
That's a big one.
Yep.
It's a big one. And you have to have triggers like, you know, it's like, oh, man, this is just whatever it is. I felt like this now for 2 days.
Right.
Whatever. Ooh, okay.
Right.
Got to do something different today. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like this tomorrow.
You know, it's interesting. It was a long time ago. I listened to a Jewish Holocaust victim at Auschwitz, and he could not change his environment for obvious reasons, right, as a child. And he's lived on to be, I mean, he's passed now, but this was years ago. He lived on to be about 80, and he was just this positive character, glowing with joy. And I remember Oprah asking, how in the world, going through what you went through and talking about all these things, he said, because when I close my eyes, and I could envision what I wanted to envision where I was in that space in that time, nobody could take that away from me.
I was in a different space.
I was in a different space. And he would talk about going to islands and going to beaches, and he would just let his mind go to these wonderful places. I have chills thinking about it because it's the secret in a way. Yeah. It is being able to not only change your environment physically, but you have to find yourself also changing your mental state in that environment. Yeah. You can change your environment. I've been in a situation where I've changed my environment and I don't change my mental state. And and now I haven't even taken the time to appreciate, the effort I've made to come out and change my environment. Yeah. And so you have to be willing and self-aware enough to be able to make that change, that shift.
And find what works for you, right? What works for me isn't going to work for you.
Correct.
For some people, that's just go and sweating it out. For some people, it's a long hike. For some people, it's just going and sitting still next to the river and just listening to the birds in the water, right?
Sounds great.
So whatever it is, find your thing that allows you to change your state. And it might take a little bit of trial and error to figure that out. But you got to change your state for sure.
Right.
So,
I'm really encouraged today. I'm really encouraged. I'm motivated by this conversation. It's really cool to see you really emotionally stable. I know that's the topic today, but I walked into the room. In fact, I even addressed you and just said, checking in. How are you, man? You've been going through a lot of stuff. And to see you respond with energy was really uplifting for me.
Well,
that was really cool, life-giving.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's not without effort, right? That's not a natural response.
Yeah.
And so I've focused hard to try and learn how to use my emotions to my advantage.
Yep.
Versus allowing them to control me.
It's working.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
It is.
It's a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Love you,
brother.
Okay. Next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Processing Purpose. We hope you grabbed a few gold nuggets to take one step forward in your journey of life and business. Please remember to like and subscribe our channel if you'd like to get more content to help you build and grow everything around you. Make today your best day. Today is day one.